Well, hey everybody, John Wrestling here, and this is every TNA/Impact Wrestling King of the Mountain match ranked from worst to best. If you don't know what the King of the Mountain match concept is, allow me to explain as best I can what it is. It's essentially a reverse ladder match. You have to climb a ladder, hang a title up on a hook that's above the ring, and you win. Sounds easy. Take a ladder, smash everybody in the face with a title, set the ring on fire except the area where you had the ladder, and put the ladder up and hang it up on a hook. Don't set the ring on fire, that's a bad idea. But it sounds simple, except it's not. Because to be able to hang up the title, you have to pin somebody in the match, champion or otherwise, one of the participants, and the person pinned goes to a penalty box at ringside, while the person who made the successful pin climbs a ladder and attempts to put the thing up on the hook, but everybody else, except for the person in the penalty box, is allowed to go at you and stop you. Now, it sounds convoluted, it sounds stupid, and honestly, the rules are. But the match itself, the 12 matches in general, the revival didn't necessarily work in 2015, 2016. It sort of did, but it didn't. The peak was from 04 to 09, in my personal opinion. But actually, the wrestlers generally made it work. So yes, convoluted rules aside, let's take a look at every single one of these King of the Mountain matches and figure out worst to best. And honestly, even the worst one wasn't that bad. It was Bram, Eli Drake, Andrew Everett, Jesse Goddard, and Robbie E. for the King of the Mountain Championship. And this was actually the last one because it was from April 22nd of 2016. And Bram, this is when they were still pushing Bram for some reason. It wasn't bad, it wasn't great. Since they were featuring it on TV, they were trying to boost ratings. I don't blame them. It's a smart thing to do. Use a big ladder match concept and build on it and everything. It was okay, and everybody involved did fine. Bram winning, it was what it was. We then get number 11, PJ Black, Lashley, Chris Mordesky, Chris Masters, by the way, in case you don't know his actual name, Robbie E., and Eric Young, another King of the Mountain title match. This was actually the second King of the Mountain title ladder match that took place barely 2 months after Slammiversary 2015. But yeah, it took place on August 12th, 2015, and PJ Black, who... Justin Gabriel, PJ Black now in Ring of Honor. It was what it was. It wasn't anything. It wasn't anything bad. Everybody could, PJ Black, you put him in a ladder match, you're gonna get some spectacular stuff. And Eric Young still was clicking on all cylinders here, but yeah, not great. The King of the Mountain title was just, it felt much more less third rate and much more like a fourth rate title, even though everybody was battling for it. The title just felt very, very, very blah. Number 10, Jeff Jarrett versus Matt Hardy versus Eric Young versus Drew Galloway versus Bobby Roode. King of the Mountain titles, Slammiversary 2015. Jeff Jarrett coming back to Impact and doing this. And yeah, no, I didn't like it. No, sir, I don't like it. It was not very good. This was the first Slammiversary since Impact had been kicked off of Spike TV, because in the 2014 one, they were still on Spike TV till Dixie fucked that all the way up. But with this, it was Jeff Jarrett coming back. It was a way to get Global Force Wrestling going. And then they had that merger for a bit, and it didn't work. It just damaged Impact more. I really feel bad for the people that bought into that, because it was Jarrett doing his usual scheme and everything and whatnot. But that's a whole nother story for another day. Jeff Jarrett ended up winning it. It was fine. It was fine, I guess. I put this a little bit above because at least it was the first, King of the Mountain match in not 9 years, but in 6 years. Felt like 9 years. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. Jarrett won. Whatever. It was fine. And then we get number 9. Eric Young versus Will Osprey versus Big Damo. If you don't know who Big Damo is, look it up. You'll recognize him. Versus Bram versus Jimmy Havoc. King of the Mountain title. And this is from March 8th of 2016. Do you think they overdid the King of the Mountain thing at all? Because 2 King of the Mountain matches within or just within like 2 months of each other, bit much. But all these guys could really do some great shit and everything. Even Bram, who I'm not like the biggest fan of. You got Jimmy Havoc in a ladder match. Shut up and take my money. Will Osprey doing some great things. Even though he's gone on to do even better things, you got to start somewhere, and he did some good flippy shit. Big Damo being the big monster there. This was the best King of the Mountain title match, like at least, of the King of the Mountain era. This was pretty much the peak of it. Things got better, got better in the earlier days, or things were better in the earlier days, but It was fine. Though that match was fine, and it had a good mix of talent. Eric Young was gone from the company soon after that. But then we get to the OG era of the King of the Mountain match. We get Samoa Joe versus Robert Roode versus Booker T versus Christian Cage versus Rhino for the TNA title at Slammiversary 08. This was when Christian Cage and Rhino were still, I guess, kind of, just kind of reigniting their feud for a little bit. You had Booker T and Joe that were having this. You had Robert Roode that was in it. This was right before Robert Roode and James Storm really got going as Beer Money. I think like very shortly after this, Beer Money started to be formed. Great team, by the way. Robert Roode being involved in a couple great teams. Storm being involved in a couple tremendous teams. Beer Money and America's Most Wanted, two of the best teams in Impact history. Two of the best teams, I would say, in the last 20 years. My personal opinion. But that aside, Samoa Joe was the champion, had come out of lockdown. Samoa Joe had one of the limpest TNA title reigns I've ever seen. They just seemed to have no faith in him after he won the title from Kurt Angle. Which is sad, because he could have been a really good person for the company. Now, yeah, maybe they waited a little bit long on it. Kinda. But also, their booking with him after could have saved it, and it didn't. This was fine. It did lead to the Joe Booker T feud, which I didn't really care for because it was sloppy. But of the matches, this was probably the weakest. It still had some good spots in it, though. Number 7, Kaz versus Chris Sabin versus Curryman versus Jimmy Rave versus Johnny Devine. Number 1 contenders matches for the X Division title from Impact on June 5th, 2008. And this pretty much was, it was weird because it felt like this should have taken place at the pay-per-view. You probably should have just made this be the second, the first ever X Division King of the Mountain match. And you could have just made it for a title shot or whatever. I feel like they could have done more with this instead of having it take place just before the pay-per-view. I mean, it's a nice way to hook the people. I just felt they could have done better with it. Kaz did end up winning. This is the second ladder match that Kaz actually won in a number of months. He beat Christian Cage at Genesis for a TNA heavyweight title shot at, just like I think shortly after the pay-per-view. I think he faced Kurt Angle like the week after, which was a great match and one that I will mention on another list, top 25 or 25 underappreciated ladder matches. Spoiler, it's up pretty goddamn high. But Kaz, this is when they were still using him pretty well. Him and Daniels and Scorpio Sky are doing great as SCU. And, Kaz and Daniels are great as Bad Influence. I was really excited to meet them, and super nice guys, by the way. But Kaz, I felt that Kaz was always bigger in the X Division after a while. I understood why he was in the X Division for, a good portion because he was a great wrestler. They could have transitioned him to the main event, and they just didn't pull the trigger on it, and I don't understand why. I just don't get it. I don't know if it was politics or what. But still, a fine ladder match, and then we get to number 6, Jeff Jarrett versus Christian Cage versus Abyss versus Ron Killings versus Sting, NWA World Title Slammiversary 06. While a very fun match and a way to kind of just tie a whole bunch of feuds together while, spreading out and doing some more, because Christian Cage and Sting would end up kind of having a bit of a, well, not a bit of a feud. They would have a bit of a feud afterwards. This could have gone so much better than it did, but they tried to do a screw job ending with Zbyszko and Earl Hebner screwing over everybody so Jeff Jarrett could win. And the crowd wasn't happy because they didn't want to see another Jeff Jarrett title reign. And I also realized that, I said earlier about Slammiversary 08, Rhino and Christian Cage, actually, this was long after their feud had ended in 2006/early 2007. This was kind of like where the beginnings of Christian Cage's heel turn would start, because he would screw over Sting a couple months later. This should have been better than it was. The attempt at doing another screwjob ending did not sell well with a lot of people, and a lot of people didn't like it. The match itself had some good spots. The ending did drag it down. Number 5, Kurt Angle versus Mick Foley versus Jeff Jarrett versus AJ Styles versus Samoa Joe TNA title Slammiversary 09. This was almost as bad of an ending as the one I just mentioned, but this was Mick Foley entering as champion in 2009. I can't imagine why some people look back on Impact and kind of scratch their head with some of this stuff, because they had a lot of great talent. They still do. They got some great talent and are introducing some new concepts and some new shit, and that's great. The problem is they over-relied on a lot of past their prime performers, and Foley being champion did not help the main event scene at all. It didn't. Sting being champion was one thing, because at least he seemed dedicated. Foley was 43 at this point, and I think, 41-42 at this point, and was moving a lot worse than that. But still, it was fine, except for the end, because you had Joe look like he's going to be feuding with the Main Event Mafia that Angle and Sting were part of. And then Joe looks like he's going to hit Angle with the title and then hands him the title. Angle hangs it up and wins. So Foley's title lands. Joe looks like a goof because he joins, the Main Event Mafia when he should have been feuding with them. And then this was one of Jeff Jarrett's last pay-per-view appearances before he went away for a bit because he turned out he was banging Karen Angle. Well, I mean, Karen and Kurt had divorced, but the whole point is that ended up happening, and then Jarrett lost a lot of power. But this was a match that had great bumps. I mean, AJ Styles took a couple of insane bumps here. It just felt like they could have done more. And I mean, storyline-driven ladder matches are not a bad thing. The problem is, again, Joe facing Kurt wasn't all that great. The more I think about it, the more I'm criticizing this stuff, some of the storylines kind of sucked, but the matches were pretty damn good. And you can say that about a lot of WWE and WCW ladder matches, though. A lot of them. Then we get to number 4, Jeff Jarrett versus Ron Killings versus Raymond Rob Killings versus Raven versus AJ Styles versus Chris Harris, NWA title, TNA Weekly Pay-Per-View 97, June 2nd, 2004, right before they got on Fox Sports Net, or maybe right after. Actually, I think they debuted in June. I think they debuted in the very beginning of June, so I think this was to lead in. So AJ Styles was champion, and Ron Killings was champion, and Ron Killings is a 2-time NWA champion. Are you shocked? Because I kind of am. Nothing against the guy, it's just I always forget. I remember he won the title once, and I always forget, oh yeah, he was champion. Jarrett ended up winning. He would become the king of the mountain, and they would carry that for a while. Really good 4-disc set of his, matches, by the way, that they released a while ago. This was good. It did establish Jarrett as a heel force and everything, led to him being champion for a while. He was champion a little bit too long. He held it for almost a year and lost it to AJ Styles at Hard Justice 05 in May of 05. And then, it just felt like that championship reign went on a little bit too long. Was what it was. Jarrett was a good heel, though. Raven didn't quite get it here, but Raven would get a title shot about a year later and would actually make the most of it. The match was fine. I actually really did enjoy this one. Yeah, okay, you could argue that Jarrett maybe shouldn't have won it, but hey, maybe he stayed on top a little bit too long, but at this time, I understood why he won it. Number 3, Suicide versus Jay Lethal versus Consequences Creed versus Chris Sabin versus Alex Shelley, X Division title, Slammiversary 09. Terrific. This was great stuff. This is what the X Division should have been for years and years. And I mean, until they watered it down for a few years because Hogan and Bischoff were idiots. Well, Hogan in particular, and Dixie, and whoever the hell else was influencing them. Not doing the best thing with the X Division. Even though they had some good matches, it felt like it was getting watered down and being made a joke out of, and I didn't get it. But with this, terrific stuff. The Suicide character was ridiculous. But the performers in there, which I believe 2 of them, at least in 09, were Kaz, and then I think Kaz got injured, and Daniels was champion. And Daniels was under the mask, and I believe was champion at the time. Suicide, yeah, okay, goofy gimmick aside, this was really good and encapsulated perfectly what the X Division should be. This was a lot of fun and shouldn't have been the only X Division, King of the Mountain match, in my personal opinion. I kind of wish it would have just made a staple of the future Slammiversary editions. It might have made the pay-per-views a whole lot better than it did. Even though I get maybe they didn't want to keep doing it, it got people on the card and tied in some stories, but also created some new feuds. I felt like they lost a little bit of magic when they took it away, because then when they brought it back, it just didn't have the same magic to it. Great match with the X Division wrestlers, though. And then we get number 2, Raven versus AJ Styles versus Monty Brown versus Abyss versus Sean Waltman, NWA title, Slammiversary 05. If I recall correctly, Jeff Hardy was supposed to be part of this, but no-showed the previous pay-per-view. So he was taken out. I think he was suspended. Jeff Jarrett was going to be part of this, but then Jarrett was suspended for attacking a fan. And this was right after I think they got kicked off of, they left Fox Sports Net. They didn't want to sign a new deal or something like that, and then they were they were on their website only and on pay-per-view, for something like this and other pay-per-views they did. But Raven's title reign often gets forgotten about because it took place strictly on the internet, which is a shame because Raven, being NWA champion, even though the NWA title at this point was kind of my opinion, compared to the lineage, there were still some good people that held it. It's sad that Raven's title reign is kind of forgotten about. It is like, people are like, oh yeah, he was champion. It's really just sad that it's forgotten about, but still, he won it here. And it was a good match. It was actually really good. This was when Sean Waltman still had something. Abyss had, some good stuff going. Monty Brown still being over. They really missed the boat with Monty Brown, though. I'll say that much. And AJ, of course. Come on. AJ Styles. He was champion. Aired here, but then Raven won it. So it was good stuff. But number one, Kurt Angle versus Samoa Joe versus AJ Styles versus Christian Cage versus Chris Harris. TNA title Slammiversary 07 to crown the first ever TNA era champion. Not NWA TNA, not the NWA champion. Nope, they got away from the NWA. First ever TNA champion. I believe it was Angle, Christian Cage, and Sting in a triple threat match at Sacrifice 07 that led to the title being held up because, they were leaving the NWA. So they decided, okay, we're no ways champion. We're crowning a new champion here. And this was actually pretty good. This is probably the best encapsulation of the entire concept where everything worked. Chris Harris looked like a beast. Everybody looked good here. Christian Cage seemed like a cowardly heel, but wanting to get his title back. Kurt winning here, though, was great. He would be champion for a while until Bound for Glory, and then lose it to Sting, and then win it back shortly after, because they kept doing one-year deals with Sting. But this actually had some great spots. AJ, of course, taking, some insane bumps, as AJ always did. And this is when AJ was kind of doing his weird cowardly heel thing and goofy heel thing, where AJ was a great heel, but they kind of misfired with some of this stuff. Even though I got what they were trying to do, it didn't come across on TV all that great. But this match was very, very good. And that's my favorite King of the Mountain match of all time. I hope they bring it back at some point. I would actually buy the Slammiversary pay-per-view if they bring... And I mean, I don't know if they're going to bring it back. I would actually buy the Slammiversary pay-per-view if they brought it back. But maybe they will. Who knows? Anyway, agree, disagree with what I said? Like, share, subscribe. Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I will see you soon.